Louise, tell us where we are.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'm actually going to turn my video off because I've got low connectivity here, so you'll just hear me talk. But I'm going to talk a little bit about and show you some photographs from the trip I did last summer to the Nahanni River. So it's the Nahanni National Park Reserve in the Northwest Territories. And it was over the last week in June, beginning of July. I timed it to get as many of the wildflowers as I could for the spring. And the map on the right-hand side shows the area of the river we explored. So starting from Virginia Falls, it's in that sort of red ovoid shape through Hell's Gate, and then the Funeral and Headless Ranges down to Nahanni Butte. Change slide. Just remembered I've got to remind you to change the slides for me. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, it's not changing. There we go. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I thought I'd show you a few photographs to start off with to set the scene, to give you an idea of where it actually is and where the flowers are found. So the top left photograph is from the floatplain just above the Virginia Falls. And if you look very carefully, there's a little white line sort of just parallels the rough water on above the water, and that is part of the boardwalk. So the whole of this section of the park is boardwalked. So all the photographs of plants I took were actually taken from the boardwalk looking down into the bogs. The centre top photograph shows a section of the boardwalk, and in the distance behind the trees you might be able to make out a mountain, which is Sunblood Mountain, and that's where one of the hikes went to. Top right is a view from the top of the falls looking down into the fourth canyon, which is the first canyon you go through, just to give an idea of the scale of the walls of the canyon. It's in places it's over 1,000 meters tall. So quite an amazing sort of place. Bottom right is a picture of the falls themselves, which are about twice the height of Niagara Falls. And again, you can just see the edge of Sunblood Mountain on the right-hand side at the top of that photograph. And then the narrowest part of the river is at the gate, which is about 300 feet across. And you might be able to make out a little red raft in just to the right-hand side of that opening there, which gives an idea again of the scale. And then the bottom left is taken from one of the campsites. So all the campsites along the route were either on beaches or on floodplains, so areas that would have flooded when the waters were higher. So again, that's where most of the plants would have been found. So Bob, can you change the slide again, please? So I'm going to show you some of the flowers I saw. Those of you who've met me and know me know I'm a complete novice at this, so I'm going to refer to them as their common names. I have tried my best to identify them as accurately possible. Some of the ones I really struggled with, Bob's given me a hand, but there may well be some that I haven't got right, so you'll have to excuse me for that. But these were 3 of the 5 orchids I found on the trip. So all of these 3 here were seen within a few feet of stepping off the floatplain. So this is above the falls, but they're also seen lower down the falls as well. And they're these beautiful coloured spotted lady slipper, the fly speckled, and then the sparrow's egg lady slippers. Change slide, please, Bob. So the next 2 ones I really struggled to identify. So Bob helped me out with these, and I think we came to the conclusion that the one on the left is the Northwind bog orchid with the wider stem and the longer leaves up the stem, and then on the right the blunt leaf rain orchid with the thinner stalk and the basal leaves. Also use the North American Orchid Centre website to help with identification of the orchids, as well as iNaturalist. While I was out on the trip itself, was using the CCAP. Next slide, Bob. 2 of the flowers this is one of the 2 flowers I really was looking out for. So it's the Nahanni Ester, which has a yellow centre and then white to pale pink leaves. And it's only found in the park reserve around the lower part of the South Nahanni River. The photograph in the centre shows that generally it's found around the hot springs, so it seems to thrive on the calcium deposits around the springs, and you can see it growing up here through the moss. There was a survey done in the park in 2019, and they found about 130,000 stems of this. There are 63 hot springs, but only 6 of them had the flowers in the locality. The asters I found were the one on the right, which is the pink aster in amongst the pebbles there, and I think this is probably the Siberian aster. Sorry, did somebody else say something? No? Okay, next slide then, please, Bob. The second thing I was looking for, Mountain Avens Dryas integrifolia, if I pronounced that right. So this is a white flower, and it's the territorial flower of the Northwest Territories. So what I did see was wide expanses of these beautiful seed heads in quite a lot of the areas, particularly around the campsites. But you can probably see from the photograph that there is some yellow in this photograph, and the only flowers I found were like the bottom right there, which is a yellow flower. So I think what I was looking at here were the yellow Mountain Avens rather than the white. Next slide, please, Bob. My categorizing is going to be colourful from here on. So these are the pinks. And these are the dwarf fireweed and paintbrush were beautiful collections of these around many of the campsites. So particularly along the streams, and these are streams that run from canyons into the main Nahanni River. And I guess the interesting thing about this was one of the day hikes where we had to keep crossing the brook or the stream to walk up the canyon, and these flowers were abundant everywhere. Later on that afternoon, it started to rain and it poured down for 24 hours. So by the time we packed up camp this following morning, this area was under a foot of water. So I think if we'd come through a couple of days later, there probably wouldn't have been many of these plants left. There was also a chive plant at this particular campsite, but I think that was probably an introduced species because it was right next to where the kitchen area was, where the campsite was. Next slide, please. So I saw a couple of wintergreens. So the one side did Parola on the left there. And as I mentioned earlier, I used the CCAP, and the central photograph it identified as bog wintergreen. And I think the same was for the one on the right, but I'm not quite so sure about this one. There were some other photographs I had of Parolas, and the CCAP suggested that some of them might have been the large flowered wintergreen, but none of those photographs were clear enough to be able to share with you here. So I'd be interested to see what people think about those. Next slide, Bob. My yellow collection. There were quite a few goldenrods that I saw along the way, but very few of them actually had flowers on, so they were very difficult to tell what they were. Bob helped with this one. We think it was the Western sticky goldenrod. One of the interesting ones I'd never seen before was Death Camas. So I saw this, it was on the scree slopes of the Sunblood Mountain and along most of the campsites and any of the walks we went into the woodland areas. So that was very widespread throughout the trip. Next slide, Bob. A few more flowers over the course of the 12 days. I probably photographed between 50 and 60 flowers. I haven't identified them all, and some of them were just leaves that it was too late for the flowers. So these are just a few of the white ones. And again, here on the small flower anemone, Bob helped me identify that one as well. Okay, next slide, please. And then these are a couple of other, well, 4 others that I thought I'd include in here. Again, it was too late to see the flowers on the false Solomon seal. This Butterworth was the only plant I actually saw a flower on. All the others were just leaves. I threw in a photograph of the prickly rose because they had some beautiful blooms on those in the upper part of the walk. And I think, Bob, there's one more slide. Yeah, so I'm going to stop there on the another of my orchids, and just thanks for listening, and a really big thank you for Bob for helping with some of the identification, and also for doing the slides for me. I have gone through it quite quickly, but I was worried I'd lose my connectivity, so thank you.